першу чергу я представлюся, я називаюся Ігор Марков, я завідувач відділу соціальної антропології Інституту народознавства НАН України. І першим ділом, що я хочу зробити, тут перекладачі кажуть, щоб я говорив в мікрофон. Дякую. Першим ділом, що я хочу зробити, це подякувати Центру міської історії за те, що ми нарешті проводимо спільний міжінституційний методологічний семінар. І це, звичайно, дуже гарне досягнення обох наших інституцій. Думаю, що воно буде повторюватися, бо сили науковців, сили інтелектуалів треба об'єднувати. І тим більше, що сьогодні маємо добру нагоду для спільного методологічного семінару двох інституцій. Тут, якраз в Центрі міської історії, до нас приїхав доктор Мустафа Аксакал. Він є дослідником із Білефельдського університету, факультету соціології, учень відомого міграціолога, можна сказати, одного з найбільш відомих міграціологів у світі, професора Томаса Файста. І сам він є дуже відомий міграціолог, оскільки, як ви вже могли прочитати, він, по суті, порівнює міграційні процеси і міграційні потоки між двома континентами. Один з них – це найбільший в світі міграційний потік Мексика-США, найінтенсивніший міграційний потік. І другий – євразійський так званий міграційний потік, до якого входить і Україна також. Це міграції з Азії до Європи і, зокрема, до країн Євросоюзу, і тут, знову ж таки, зокрема, до Німеччини. І, власне, це якраз на цьому я хотів заакцентувати увагу, тому що його докторська робота Transnational Development, Limitations and Potentialities of a Model for Migration and Development, Case Study Кахканія, було здійснено якраз у Мексиці. А зараз доктор Мустафа Аксакал є фактично координатором від Німеччини у великому проєкті міжнародному Euronet, де я також і наші колеги з відділу мають честь з ним співпрацювати. Це є проєкт, який досліджує міграційні потоки із країн Азії до Європейського Союзу. Ну і у фокусі сьогоднішньої доповіді доктора Мустафи Аксакала будуть якраз нові міграційні виклики, пов'язані із біженцями, а також із інтенсивною міграцією до Німеччини студентів, серед яких, як, мабуть, ви всі знаєте, є і багато українців. Ці нові виклики, нові міграційні виклики фактично змушують переглядати старі міграційні теорії, тому що і політика європейська в сфері міграції, і дотеперішні погляди на міграцію змінюються у зв'язку з цими міграційними новими потоками і у зв'язку із глобалізацією. Відтак, я вітаю у нас у Львові і в нашому, і в центрі тут міської історії, і у нас в відділі соціальної антропології доктора Мустафу Аксакала. І хочу йому щиро подякувати за його приїзд, бо цей приїзд був його інтелектуальною, його особистою ініціативою, довершеною за його власний кошт. І, власне, я думаю, що в наш час це також, як кажуть, багато коштує, Тому я з радістю надам слово доктору Мустафі Аксакалу для його доповіді, його презентації, яка є перед вами і тему якої я вже окреслив.
Thank you very much, Igor. Maybe you need to take. Контакт погано.
Так, ну може тоді мій мікрофон.
О, світиться.
Ні, але буде чогось.
Контакт поганий, але щось контакт поганий.
Давайте тоді, може, це вставимо, та й все. Це я візьму. Так. О, it's okay.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, before starting my presentation, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank to the Department of Anthropology, especially here the Ethnology Institute of the National Academy of Science, as well as the Center for Urban History. My special thanks for Igor for the invitation too. It was very nice to see you again, Igor.
Thank you.
Okay. So the title of the presentation is The Scope of Migration Theories in the Context of Contemporary Human Mobility, and especially with a special attention to international students and asylum seekers. The title says that this is the case study of Germany, but you will see that I will also talk about the European experiences and also compare that with different regions. So why this title? Why the idea? We had a conference in 1 month ago in Bucharest. It was a question. The title of the conference. It was actually a European Sociological Association event, and the name was the question was a new age of migration. Yeah. So the question was that is there a new age of migration, and this is something what is also in line with our study in which we are engaged with Igor in the Euronet project. So there we had also the experiences over the last years that we can identify new migration categories that are contemporarily more relevant than in the past. So therefore, the idea was to reflect a little bit these experiences in this presentation. Okay, so briefly the outline. I will first talk about general trends in global migration. Thereafter, show a little bit, talk about quantitative developments with regard to international students, thereafter with asylum seekers, then discuss some migration theories. It's a selection of the variety that exists. Make a critical assessment of the migration theories, and talk finally about some alternative theoretical approaches. Especially with regard to studying international students and humanitarian migrants. So, as we will see, and I hope it will be the discussion about this, we will see that there are several theoretical and methodological challenges. Yeah. So maybe these alternative approaches are at the position to answer to this, to give an answer to these challenges. Okay, so I'm sure you are aware of this information, but as it's always good to have a broad introduction to the topic. So what are the global trends? We have around 763 million internal migrants worldwide. It's an estimation, obviously. We have around 244 million international migrants in 2015. We see it's almost 100 million more than in 25 years ago. But if we see that in relation to the population growth, then we are speaking about 3.3% of the world population who are internationally moving. So the most important continents with regard to immigration are Europe, Asia, but also North America. In the European Union, we have around 33 million persons who are living there, but are not born and raised in this place. So, with regard to the European Union in 2014, the most important groups were Turkey, followed by Moroccan migrants, Chinese, Indians, and also Ukrainians. Obviously, we need here to distinguish between those who recently arrived to the European Union and those who are living over long term there, so to say temporary and permanent migrants maybe. So in the case, for instance, of the Turks, it is evident that most of them are representing permanent migrants, and even from the second or third generation. In the case of the Chinese, we can see that most of them are recently came recently to Germany, to Europe, excuse me. So the most relevant immigration countries are the USA, followed by Germany, Russian Federation. So the three most relevant countries. Around 50%, 48% exactly, are female migrants of the global number of international migrants. The median age of international migrants is around 30 years. Yeah? And as you also know, we could also see over the last years that there was an important increase in remittances of migrants. Yeah? So what we see here is that some of these insights are correlating with the characteristics, for instance, of international students. Yeah? When we are talking about the age groups, in other cases, we see also, for instance, in the case of the Chinese immigrants, there is also, as you will see, a correlation with international students, as they represent one of the most important groups in Germany, in Europe. But with regard to the remittances, it is another story. Yeah? So there we can see, for instance, I think, Igor, you had the same experience. We can see that at least in the case of some migrant categories, financial remittances are not that important. Yeah? Or they are important, but then it is important in the, on a contrary sense. So reverse financial remittances are important, for instance. Yeah? So what we can here see is that the global trends sometimes are reflecting the increasing importance of some categories, but on the other side, sometimes it is not the case. Good. So, as I said, in this conference we are talking about the new age of migration. So, but there's a discussion about these migration waves. Yeah? So at least we can distinguish two different periods. Yeah? So the first migration wave was the age of mass migration, to say between the 1850 and 1940. And that was related to settlement. Yeah? So in the classical sense, as we know that as the transatlantic migration, a lot of Europeans moved to the United States in order to start a new life. So, and the second migration wave was defined by Castles and Miller. As you know, the name of the book is also The Age of Migration. Here the authors are talking about the migration after the Second World War, which was mainly affected by globalization processes and occurred all over the world. So that is the distinguishing aspect with regard to the first wave. Yeah? There we can see a migratory relation between two continents, and in the second wave we see that that all continents are involved. Yeah? So, and the third one, yeah, that is my, let's say, my hypothesis of the presentation, is the new age of migration. Yeah? So, what are the characteristics? The characteristics are, for instance, that the causes of migrations are not always economically motivated. So to say, migrants are not always economically motivated. It is not necessarily a south-north migration. Yeah, what is assumed in the second wave, at least. And we can also see that there's the importance of south-south migration, yeah? Especially when we consider refugees and about their journeys when they are passing transit countries. Yeah? It is often based first, yeah, in the first step, on the south-south migration. Okay. So the next slides and the next insights are related to the third wave, to say. I'm not talking about Turks in the second or third generation, but I'm talking about those migrants who are coming recently to receiving countries. Okay, so let's start with international students. One of the statements of the presentation is that obviously international students have also existed 60, 70 or 100 years ago. Yeah? But the point is that the numbers are constantly increasing. So according to the OECD statistics, the number of international students in 1975 was around 800,000. In 2011 it rose to around 4.3 million, and now in 2040 we have around 4.5 million persons who are moved based on educational reasons. Yeah? So what we can see here, at least between 75 and 2040, is a tremendous increase of international students. So the key role here is in Asia, in the continent of Asia. At least China, India, and South Korea are with around 54%, 53% the main source countries of international students. Some of these countries are also representing relevant and increasingly relevant destination countries. We can see that in the case of China. So what we know is that international students or mobility represents for university a solid financing source, as well as a symbol for educational quality of the institutions, of the educational institution. So that can be an important factor if we want to analyze the causes of international migration. So it is to say that the universities are looking for strategies in order to attract students. I'm not sure how is it, for instance, in the Ukraine, if there's also incoming students, but I know that there are in Germany at least a lot of...
I say about it later.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, okay.
It's a very interesting question.
Yeah, okay, good. It could be a good base for the discussion later. I don't know if you can see that. I know it's a horrible table. Yeah, it should be... but what we can see here is, it's really easy to understand this table. We see on the one side, on the left side, we see the countries, yeah, of our region, of destination of international students. We see then thereafter the total number in thousands. Yeah, we see then, and that is the important point here, is how many of the total number, yeah, is going to places, to countries of the OECD. How many are going to places of the European Union? Yeah? So there we can, for instance, see, yeah, that you can see that in the green ones. Yeah, the green ones are symbolizing, showing that there is a high share of international students who are going to OECD countries and to EU countries. Yeah, they are around 73% on the one side and 71% on the other. So what we can also see here is that that in other cases, for instance, in Germany, yeah, a lot of incoming students are from not so many students are coming from OECD countries, and not so many coming from the EU countries. Yeah? So you can see that in the red ones are showing very low levels, yeah, and the green ones are showing very high levels of students who are coming from this context. On the right side, we see the share of women. Yeah? So there you can see almost in every case that's a highly balanced situation. So we have around, for instance, in the case of Belgium, we have 57% female migrants. Yeah? We will later see, that's also something that result of the Euronet research that, for instance, in the case of Germany, we have, that's not, it is not always that balanced. Yeah? We have, for instance, in the case of Indian students, a high imbalance. We see that there are around 3/3 of the migrants, of the student migrants, are male, and only 1/3 are female. Yeah? Okay. So here, in the next table, you can see the mobility of students within Europe. Yeah? To say from Germany to Spain, or there we can see the development over the last 12 years, 11 years, sorry. So what we can see here is, again, the green one are the countries with a high increase over the last years, and the red ones with a low increase. So, for instance, in the case of Malta, it's an island, yeah, evidently. We had in 2001 0.1 to say 100 students, yeah. So on the other side, in 2012 we have 300. So it's not a really big decrease. But if we see that, for instance, in the case of the UK, yeah, there we had in 2001 around 110,000, and in 2012 we have almost 206,000. So we can see that, in other words, we can see that that the mobility of international students within Europe is highly different. Yeah? We have countries with a high increase, and we have countries with a very low increase. Okay. So now turning back to the German case, there we can see that China is one of the most important countries, yeah? Followed by Russia, but also we can see that India is, after 2001 at least, after 2010, sorry, the numbers are increasing really importantly. So, to talk a little bit about the social situation of the students in Germany, there you can see that the age group is around 19 to 25. Yeah? Around 88% are involved in degree mobility. So, in the student mobility studies, we distinguish between degree and credit mobility. Yeah? So credit mobility would be, for instance, a stay based on Erasmus, and degree is to study your whole bachelor or your master. Yeah? So the relevant group is here definitely bachelor and master. The subjects, the most relevant subjects are engineering, law, economics, social science on the one hand, and on the other, mathematics and natural science. So, as I said, there is an uneven share of female students among relevant Asian countries. India is a really good case, but there are also other cases. So, financing of studies, there, as I also mentioned at the beginning, they have really different strategies. Most of them took some loans or had previously worked and had savings, or they were financed by the parents. Others are also working in part-time in Germany, and that's their strategy to finance their studies in Germany. What is also interesting is that most of them, of the interviewed partners in this case, had previous internal or international migration backgrounds. So, in relation to the savings, there we can also see that most of them had used the time abroad to save the money in order to study. So, studying in Germany sometimes also means that it's a long-term strategy. Yeah? So, it was planned, let's say, 5 or 10 years before the study starts. So, what we can also see is we found that there are some integration issues among the students, for instance, related to the language skills that they have, but also they were confronting discrimination, for instance, in everyday life. So why I'm talking about these characteristics? Because we will later, when we contrast this information with the theories that exist, we will see that these theories are not able to analyze this kind of information. So, but we will turn back to that. So, asylum seekers. The total number worldwide is 65 million. Forcibly displaced in 2015. Of this total number, around 21 million are persons representing refugees and around 40 million internally displaced persons. So the most important countries are Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia. They are representing around more than a half of the total number. Evidently, the major reason for flight is related to seeking protection. Yeah, it's evident, not only from state repression, but also from violence by third parties within states. As you know, there is a distinction between asylum seekers and refugees, so therefore I'm mentioning that. An interesting insight also generated from our information from our interviews is that most of the interviewed asylum seekers in Germany, they were from different countries, argued that yes, protection is the most important thing, but there is also the idea, the consideration that to continue their lives, because it is not, they are not able to do that in the place of origin, so they are looking for places where they can continue their education, their careers, or in general have a peaceful life. Why I'm talking about that, I'm not sure how is it in Ukraine with the public discourses, but at least in Germany we have a division of a divided discussion. Yeah? On the one side, I'm sure you have observed that in the television, there is this really positive welcoming society and also the discourses on that. And on the other side, we also see that migration is seen as a threat. Yeah? So, and related to the second discourse, there is also the idea that the people are coming in order to exploit the welfare system, yeah? The welfare state. And so therefore, this is related to a fear. Yeah? And the interviews clearly said that they are not aiming to exploit or to use any social provision, but they want to do something and want to pay therefore, yeah, even, or work. Yeah? So also for the education, for instance, they will say, I want to start to continue my studies, yeah, and if it's necessary, I will pay that for therefore. Yeah? I don't want any gift. Yeah? And therefore it is really important to discuss this and to show that the motivations of these refugees are not only to use the welfare system, but also to continue lives. Okay, so this table shows the development between 2008 and 2015 in countries, similar to the case of international students in Europe. Thank you. We can see that among the European member states, there is a highly inequality with regard to the amounts. Yeah? So in red we can, for instance, see the countries who are very relevant with regard to the immigration of asylum seekers. As you know, Germany is one of these countries. We will turn back to the numbers with regard to Germany in the next slide. But what we, for instance, can also see, there are other countries such as France. They are almost in the same level. So they started in 2009 with, they had in 2009 42,000 asylum seekers, and around 6 years later it increased only by 30,000. So, but we have also other cases such as Hungary, yeah, where there we can see a sharp increase from 80,500 more or less in 2013 to 174,000. But as you will know the story better than me, it was a kind of forced situation for Hungary. Yeah? So they were not willing to do that, I assume. But we have also other positive examples, such as Sweden. There we can see in 2008 the numbers of humanitarian immigrants were amounted to 24,200, and in 2015 we have an increase in 156,000. So what we can see in this table especially is not only the trend over the years, but also the distribution of refugees among the different European countries. Okay. So in the case of Germany, we can see that so the blue line shows the total number of asylum applications, and the red line shows the first applications. So as we see here, at least in 2015, we can see that almost all who applied had the first application. Yeah? The total number here was 476,000. So as you see in the table, in the previous table, the difference between 441 and 476 is the number of the first applicants and the second amount. Okay. So what we see is a record. Yeah? After 92, that's the highest number in Germany. Yeah? But there's an interesting thing. Yeah? These numbers are representing the applications. Yeah? But at the end of 2015, the German government was declaring that the number of incoming asylum seekers were around 1 million by the end of 2015. So it's really unclear why now the numbers are reflected by almost a half. Yeah. So who knows what happened with the rest, yeah? But it was not only a statement, it was a statement of the Minister of the Interior, who said we have now around 1 million. So maybe it was a mistake, but I don't think that they did mistakes in this case. So it's an unresponded question, what happened. Okay. Good. So also talk a little bit about the characteristics of asylum seekers in Germany. There we can see what is interesting here especially is the recognition quote. Yeah. There we can see the most important, on the left side, the most important 10 countries in 2015. And on the right side, we see the recognition quote of each country. Yeah. So it is showing that for some cases, that is in green, we have a high degree of recognition. This is, for instance, Syria, followed by Iraq and Eritrea. Yeah. Then we have the blue one, yeah, that is showing, for instance, Afghanistan, yeah, with almost 47% of recognition. Then we see the red ones, the red colored, with a very low level of recognition. That is especially Albania, Kosovo, and Serbia. Okay. Well, we know why there's this difference in some cases. But for instance, in the case of Afghanistan, it is really not clear why the recognition quote is so low. Yeah? Because that was also a result when talking about with Afghan people, refugees, in our interviews, that the situation in Afghanistan is sometimes really critical. Yeah? They are not. There's maybe no repression by the state, but yes, by third parties. So therefore, it is an unclear situation why there are these disparities. Yeah? Exactly. So the next slide is related to the age groups. Yeah. Here's also we can also see here really interesting. We have an observation that's interesting because what we can see is that the biggest part of this of the incoming migrants in 2015 were represented by asylum seekers in the age group between 0 and 35. Yeah. What we can also see is that, especially among, with regard to the female migration, we can see that that is a selective situation. They represent almost 1/3 of the total population, and they are especially represented in the age groups under 16, and then we have the other extreme between 55 and 60, or 65 and more years. So we will turn back to that, but it is a, let's say, it is a characteristic what is really interesting. So, okay. Okay, so now the question is what the current migration theories can, or what is the explanatory power of migration theories with regard to these migrant groups that are increasingly important in Germany and Europe and probably all over the world. And where are the legs? Yeah? So we will discuss thereafter about the legs. So therefore I focused especially on migration theories that are economically focused, yeah? Because most of the migration theory, as you know, has a economic focus on migration. Yeah? It is really dominant, and maybe 80 or 90% of all theories or approaches that exist have an economic approach. Yeah? So therefore let's start with the neoclassical approach. Yeah? I know that it is not among academia, in the academia it's not so popular, the neoclassical approach, at least in the critical ones. So there we can distinguish very briefly about between the macro and the micro level. On the macro level we are talking, so it's in the tradition of Adam Smith. Economic and demographic considerations are here important, such as overpopulation, the scarcity of land, and the privatization of land. And in principle, it is assumed that migration is a result of geographical imbalances between offer and demand of labor. Linked to that is the micro-level approach, also known as the Harris and Todaro model. There it is assumed that based on these differences or imbalances, migration is especially something that is based on migrants' cost and benefit considerations. Yeah? So we also know that as the rational choice approach. So workers migrate for economic reasons, yeah? From regions featured by low wage and labor surplus to high wage and labor scarce regions. So high levels of unemployment in place of destination impedes immigration, yeah? Because according to the general equilibrium theory, the idea is that people will move to the places where where's the high demand of labor forces, and when this labor market have enough labor forces, so then on the other place there will be a deficit. So other people will go to the places where the first migrants leave. Yeah? So therefore it is an equilibrium. Yeah? And therefore, if there is unemployment in a place, it will be not attractive for people to move to these places. Yeah? And on the other side, it is also recognized that only certain population segments can migrate, yeah? According to the selectivity of migration. Okay. So another approach is probably it is not an approach, but they are the laws of migration by Rabenstein, who argues that there are certain regularities that can be observed in every type of migration. Yeah? So, but in every type, especially it means labor migration, yeah? And you will see that in the different laws, it is always related to labor migration. Yeah? So people migrate short distance, longer distance only when there is enough incentives, such as great centers of industry, commerce, and so on. So it is especially rural-urban migration, and females are dominating the migration, especially the internal migration. And as I said, the major causes are economic. What is also interesting here, that is what is now is interesting also in our in contemporary and migration studies, is the contra-stream argument. So he's arguing that each migration stream produces also the contra-streams. So, okay. The next theory, or the next approach, because we cannot talk about theories in these cases, are the pull-push factors. You will know that. It's building on the Wabenstein's ideas on the laws, seeks however to expand a little bit the panorama. So decision-making processes depend on different positive or negative incentives. So there we can see the push and pull factors. The push are located in place of origin, such as persecutions, unemployment, lack of educational infrastructure, and so on, climate change. The pull factors are, for instance, higher wages in certain places, better opportunities to education. So then there are also intervening obstacles, for instance, long distance, for instance, immigration laws, psychological calculations, language barriers, and so on. Everest Lee is also considering the individual factors, so from the something that is retrieved from these three factors. So they can, for instance, be gender, level of education, age, personality. As you know, we sometimes talk about migrant personalities. That all of them can be aspects that are relevant. It is important here to say something. Over the last decades, most of the scholars in migration studies have focused on push and pull factors. Less attention was paid to the intervening factors. So the intervening factors can say something about the calculations of migration that go beyond the economic understanding of motivations. So here we can see I'm sure you know this feature. It's from Lee, from his work in '66. There you can see the positive and negative factors on the in the origin side and the destination side, and in the middle the intervening obstacles. Good. The mobility transition, in general terms, it is related to the idea that changes in people's migration and mobility behavior is linked to different stages in the modernization process of societies. So there we have at least 5 stages. It is, you will know that from the modernization theories, they are normally not related to migration, but Zelinsky is trying to link that. So the stages are the 5 that you can see here. The pre-modern traditional society, their migration is very limited. Then we see the early transitional society, especially rural-urban flows, but also settlement and colonization. So late transitional societies, there we can see a decrease in rural-urban and international migration. But what we can observe is a growth of circular migration. So then the advanced society, there we can see that that important characteristic is that rural-urban is replaced by urban-urban migration. Especially low-skilled workers are emigrating from south to the north, and highly skilled migrants are circulating. So then we see in the future super advanced society that we have a different picture. There are better communication and delivery systems. All these factors, these improvements in technology especially, lead to the fact that that migration is decreasing, or it's finishing, in addition, also the strict controls, immigration controls are a cause of that. The mobility transition is also discussed in the concept of the migration hub. I don't know if you know that. It is, for instance, discussed in places, in regions, where there is a disparity between different countries that are in an agreement. For instance, we can see that in the North American agreement, the NAFTA. There we see that we have 3 partners there. So 2 partners are industrialized countries, the United States and Canada, and Mexico is the country where we can see, where we can find a less developed country. So the idea was, it was discussed by Stark, I think, in this context, that that when the free trade agreement started, so it was assumed that the migration levels will be relatively high, but due to the dynamics in the free trade area, it was assumed that Mexico will become an industrialized country, and therefore the migration will stop. And what we can observe is, yes, the migration was decreasing, but it was not related to the development in Mexico, so to the positive development outcomes, but it was related to the economic crisis in the United States between 2007 and 2009, more or less. And now we can again see that the numbers are increasing. And if we are looking on the development indicators in Mexico, so there we can see there is not really a development. Yes, the big companies are becoming richer and richer, but small people, the rural population at least, they are suffering on poverty and social inequality. So therefore this theory is a little bit not depicting the reality, what really happens. I'm sure we can also we will have a similar result when we are studying the European Union. So there we have the core countries, to talk in the terms of Wallerstein, and we have also the periphery countries. And I know that the European Union is not that interested in analyze this kind of disparities, but probably it will be the same. We will observe the same. Okay, so then we have the new economic labor migration theory, or the approach. Here we can see that that rationale of migration is risk sharing. It's a risk sharing strategy through the diversification of sources of income. Decision-making processes are based on household decisions. That includes that the family has a consensus about who will go, how long, and so on. Financial remittances are the most relevant revenues of this in this approach, and the outcomes of migration presents additional income next to local work, farming, and so on. And in contrast to the neoclassical approach, here we assume that wage differentials are not necessarily a necessary condition for these decision-making processes. Okay. So the dual labor market theory is claiming that the main reason of international migrations are structural demands within developed economies for low-skilled laborer. So in contrast to the push and pull factors, this theory is focusing on the pull factors. Migration is caused by pull factors in the destination countries, and migration starts not because migrants have this rationale, this economic rationale, but because they are recruited. They are hired by employers of industrialized countries, or in the name of these employers by governments, as we observed that in the 60s, 70s in Europe, in different countries of Europe. So what is also considered in this theory is that that regional income differences are not the reason for immigration, but, as I said, the demand on workers. So governments are at the position to influence international migration, but only through major changes. So the development, the theory was developed in the final of the 70s. What we know is actually, talking about the case of Germany, for instance, they are always talking about that temporary migration is converted to permanent migration. That is somehow true, but it is also there's also a mistake, because if we consider the numbers, so then we can see that around 60 million arrived at the time between until 73, but only 1/3 of them stayed, and the rest of them returned to their countries of origin. So, and it was influenced by the government due to the recruitment ban that they accomplished in 73. So there's something, but they could not totally control the numbers. As I said, around 1/3 of the 60 million stayed in Germany. So, but what is here important in this theory, and is in my opinion still relevant for the contemporary context, is that institutions, race and gender are relevant factors in the segmentation. Yeah? So we have there on the one side the primary sector and the secondary. In the secondary we find this low wage, insecure and generally unpleasant jobs. And in the second, the well-paid, especially for native workers. Yeah? So migrants accept these jobs because they don't have bargaining power, and consider the incomes in relation to their incomes in the country of origin. Yeah? And that could be also an important thing to focus on the reference point. Yeah? So there are evidences now in newer research that the reference frame, at least at the beginning, is in fact the country of origin. This is changing over time, but not at the beginning. Briefly, the world system theory. I mean, we could talk about the world system theory maybe 2 hours, so just really briefly. So the idea here is penetration of capitalist economic relations into non-capitalist or pre-capitalist societies leads to the undermining of traditional ways of living and working. So what happens here is, from a Marxist perspective, is that this situation of changing traditional ways of living and working especially is resulting in the release of the reserve army. So the reserve army is developing on the one side, but thereafter they are at the position to leave the country too. And a special magnet for these reserve armies are, for instance, global cities. These big financial centers where not only high-skilled but also low-skilled people, migrants, are more than welcome. Okay, so some critical aspects on these theories. As I said, all of them are focused on this economic sphere